On the night of what should have been a sacred union, Isabella, a young bride filled with hope, is raped by those she once called guests. Within 2 hours of her wedding vows, her bloodied body lies still, her womb torn, her dignity crushed. The festive Janur kuning, yellow coconut leaves that symbolize joy, instantly becomes a funeral banner. But death is not the end for Isabella. From her violated body rises an unquenchable vengeance. Her spirit stalks the halls, hunts the betrayers, and forces every man who lusted after her to endure the agony she suffered. The novel weaves psychopathic brutality with mystic Javanese horror, exploring not just gore, but also the psychology of shame, trauma, betrayal, and vengeance. Between Isabella's rage and her fragmented memory of love for her groom Alvaric, the lines blur between justice and madness. Christian, the friend who could have saved her but didn't, becomes both her obsession and her executioner's prey. *warm. Greetings filled with love for you who are here with us. Thank you. Your time is precious, and we truly feel honored. Before this story continues, allow us to ask, hey you, how's your heart today? If you feel present and connected, leave your trace in the comments so we know you're here and so we can include our best prayers for you. Don't forget to click subscribe and turn on the bell, not just so you won't miss the next story, but so that every hope and prayer spoken here may flow all the way to the heavens. May your steps be made easy, your heart guarded in peace, your sustenance expanded without end, and may paradise one day become your most beautiful homecoming. Amin ya Rabbal Alamin. And if you're ready, let's continue this story. Because who knows, hidden within it may lie the very answer you've been quietly searching for. The night air was heavy with incense. Smoke curled lazily toward the canopy of banana leaves woven into the Janur kuning arch that crowned the entrance. To outsiders, the yellow palm fronds meant joy, a sacred blessing from ancestors for two souls uniting as one. But in the pit of Isabella's stomach, the sight of those leaves made her shiver. Their sharp tips looked less like blessings and more like knives. The courtyard of her family's house throbbed with life. Gamelan echoed, soft at first, then loud enough to make the ground vibrate. Women in kabaya bright as flames whispered and giggled behind their fans. Men in batik smoked clove cigarettes, exhaling a sweet, choking haze. Children ran between legs, chasing the glow of sparklers. To everyone, this was a night of joy, a union. A new beginning. Isabella tried to smile as she sat beside Alvaric on the bridal dais. The carved teak chair beneath her felt more like a throne than a seat, its weight pressing down on her. Her makeup was perfect, the red lipstick too thick, her skin powdered pale. She looked like a doll. A sacred offering. Her new husband, Alvaric, was radiant. He kept clasping her hand, squeezing it as though to remind her that this was their night, their future. His suit gleamed black against the oil lamps, and his smile came easily to every guest who congratulated them. Yet his grip on her hand was sweaty, trembling, not from love, she thought, but from nerves. She turned her gaze across the yard. Faces, so many faces, but there was something wrong in their eyes. Some of the men's stares clung to her too long, hungry, stripping her in silence. Their smiles stretched wider than courtesy allowed. They toasted too eagerly, cups sloshing with dark liquid. Wine, too, much of it for a Javanese wedding. A cold wave slid down her spine. She leaned closer to Alvaric and whispered, "Do you see them staring?" But Alvaric wasn't listening. Christian, his childhood friend and now his business partner, had leaned in with a glass of Arak in hand, whispering about contracts, future deals, and the money that would soon flow in. "You need to invest before next harvest," Christian muttered, eyes sharp. Voice low enough that it was clear he thought his talk more important than his friend's wedding night. Alveric nodded eagerly, letting go of Isabella's hand. We'll talk later. Tonight. Tonight is celebration. But even as he said it, he turned his body toward Christian, leaving Isabella half forgotten on the dais. She sat stiff, her smile painted on, her lips aching from holding it. She wanted to scream. This was her night, and yet her groom was lost in numbers, contracts, in the whispers of another man. The unease grew stronger. From her seat, she could see the way several men, guests she barely knew, distant relatives, even supposed friends of Christian, watched her. They weren't subtle. Their eyes scanned her white lace kabaya, the curves of her body beneath the silk, the outline of her breasts rising with each tense breath. Their laughter was guttural, drunk, and when the gamelan struck harder, it covered the snorts and whistles they let out. One man licked his lips as their eyes met. Another leaned to whisper in his friend's ear, and both chuckled like hyenas. Her fingers curled on her lap, her nails dug into her palm until crescents of blood formed in the flesh. She wanted to stand up, to scream at them to stop, to remind them she was a bride, a woman now bound in sacred vows. But her throat locked. No sound came out. The music swelled. Shadows wavered across the courtyard. The Janur above them shook, in the wind, rattling like bones. Smile, one of the elder women hissed behind her, adjusting the back of her veil. A bride must always smile. So Isabella smiled, but her eyes burned with humiliation. Alveric laughed too loudly at something, Christian said, clapping him on the back. He didn't notice her trembling. He didn't see her shoulders tighten each time one of the drunk men raised his glass toward her. He didn't notice the hunger, the violation already happening through stares alone. Her body wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to the eyes. Her heart pounded. She looked down at her knees, at the fine embroidery of her kabaya. The lace blurred with her unshed tears. Why does no one see it? Why does no one stop them? The gamelan changed rhythm, and dancers entered the yard, their anklets jingling, their painted faces smiling. The crowd cheered. The men's stares broke from her for a moment, following the dancers. Relief. A breath. But then the dancers turned, and the men's eyes slid back to her, hungrier now, as if the performance had ignited something darker. The wine flowed again. She saw one of the men's hands tremble as he poured. His eyes were glassy, his grin too wide. The cup overflowed, spilling red down his sleeve. He laughed as though drunk on more than just alcohol. Her skin prickled. Each hair on her body rose. Alveric still wasn't looking at her. Christian leaned closer, their heads together, their words lost beneath the music. Her husband's lips moved, but none of the words were hers. None of the words were for her. She clenched her fists, hidden in her lap, nails digging deeper. Blood welled under the crescents. She embraced the pain. At least it was hers. At least it reminded her she was still alive. A drunken shout cut through the night. One of the men toasted loudly. "To the bride, may she be fertile and sweet." The crowd laughed, too loud, too knowing. The women shifted uncomfortably, but no one rebuked him. The joke hung in the air like rot. Isabella's face burned. Her heart sank. She looked again at the Janur kuning. Its long, pale leaves shivered in the wind, casting slashes of shadow across her skin. Once it had meant celebration. Now it looked like a warning, a banner waiting for blood. She forced her eyes down, whispering only to herself, lips barely moving. Why do their eyes strip me naked already? The night grew heavier. Wine blurred the edges of laughter, turning it coarse, jagged, unclean. The gamelan beat faster, cymbals clashing too loud, covering words that should never have been spoken. The courtyard reeked of clove, sweat, and something sour that made Isabella's stomach twist. At first, it was only the shouting of men who had drunk too much. Then it turned into jokes too cruel to belong to a wedding. They laughed about virgins on bridal beds, about how sweet a new bride must taste. The women flinched, but no one confronted them. Tradition was a gag. Respect for guests was a leash dot. Isabella sat frozen, her body rigid beneath her lace cabaya. Alvaric was gone, pulled aside by Christian and a circle of men discussing numbers, inheritance, the future of land deals. Their voices buzzed like flies. He did not look at her. He did not hear the laughter that stripped her bare. A hand touched her shoulder. She turned, startled. It was one of the older men, eyes red with Iraq. His smile was jagged. "Come, daughter," he said. "The ritual is not complete. There are customs you must honor, just for a moment." Her throat dried. "What ritual?" He did not answer. His grip tightened. Another man appeared at her other side, offering a smile that held no warmth. They spoke in hushed tones about ancestral blessings and chamber customs. Isabella tried to resist, but their hands pressed firmly. The music swelled, covering her small cry. From the dais, she was pulled down. Her heels scraped against the wooden steps. The crowd was too drunk, too distracted, too willing to look away. Even the women turned their faces. None of them moved. The men led her toward a side room, dark, hot, reeking of old wood and damp mats. A kerosene lamp flickered in the corner, throwing cruel shadows across the walls. The door closed with a thud that swallowed all hope. "Sit," one commanded. "This is for the ancestors. The bride must be tested." Her breath caught. "No, this isn't part of—" The first sound was fabric tearing. The lace she had worn for hours, carefully pinned, lovingly stitched, split with a shriek of threads. Their laughter was low, satisfied. Her scream tore out of her throat, then vanished beneath the crash of gamelan outside. She fought, clawing, but hands held her down. Her wrists were pinned, her legs forced apart. The music played on, as if mocking. Every strike of the gong drowned her cries. Every pluck of the strings buried her prayers. She begged. She whispered God's name, again and again, but the air swallowed it. The ceiling was silent. Her prayers rose no higher than her lips. More laughter. More cloth ripping, fingers bruising, the sound of skin against skin. Not love, not union, only violation. The lamp guttered. Its flame shook, casting shadows that writhed like demons. The room spun. She stared at the ceiling, tears blurring. Her vision until the woven bamboo looked like a net tightening above her. "God," she whispered, "please." But only laughter answered. Pain split her, sharp and merciless. She gasped, breath breaking, chest heaving like an animal caught in a trap. The world blurred, her ears rang. She tried to scream Alvaric's name, but her voice cracked, swallowed by the pounding drum outside. No one came. Her innocence tore away with every sound of cloth ripping, every grunt, every mocking cheer. Each second was an hour. Each breath was a blade. At last, the room fell silent except for her sobbing. The men slipped out one by one, careless, satisfied. Their footsteps faded into laughter outside. She was left on the floor, kabaya torn, veil crumpled like discarded paper. Her body shook. Blood stained her thighs. Her hands trembled as she tried to cover herself, but there was nothing left to protect. She dragged herself toward the bridal bed in the corner of the room, where the ceremony's consummation should have been gentle, sacred. She collapsed against the mattress, clutching the sheets. A single drop of blood slid from her body, staining the pure white cloth. The mark spread slowly, blooming red dot outside comma. The Janur cooning rattled in the wind, no longer a symbol of joy, already whispering of death. The music carried on. Drunken laughter rose and fell like waves, colliding with the clang of gamelan and the crackle of firecrackers outside the gate. To the guests, the night was still alive, still holy, still soaked in arak and smoke. But in the side chamber, the holy had already rotted. Alveric was still talking to Christian when he noticed the absence. His bride gone too long, her chair empty on the dais. At first he dismissed it. Perhaps she was with the women, retouching her makeup, tending to some ritual detail. Yet a thin knife of unease slid into his chest. He excused himself, rising abruptly. "Where are you going?" Christian asked, his tone sharp, urgent. "To find her," Alveric replied, already moving. Christian's lips parted as if to speak, but then he closed them. His eyes flicked away. He lifted his glass instead, swallowing hard. Alveric crossed the courtyard. The Janur cooning overhead rustled in the wind, hissing. Each step he took felt heavier. The laughter, once sweet, grated like broken glass in his ears. He passed men leaning against pillars, their mouths slick with drink, their eyes avoiding his. He reached the side chamber. The door hung half-closed, shadows bleeding out from within. He pushed it open. The smell hit him first. Sweat, arak, iron. The air was thick, heavy, wrong. And then, her. Isabella lay crumpled on the bridal bed, kabaya torn, veil twisted around her throat like a rope. Her face was pale, her eyes glassy, yet still wet with tears. Blood darkened the sheets beneath her, soaking into the sacred white cloth until it looked like a banner of slaughter. Alveric staggered forward, his knees almost giving out. "Isabella." She stirred faintly at the sound. Her lips trembled. From them came a whisper, broken and wet. "Alveric." He fell beside her, gathering her in his arms. She was cold, so cold, as if death had already taken half of her. Her chest rose shallowly, each breath rattling, breaking. "What have they done to you?" His voice cracked, torn from his throat like a plea. Her hand, trembling, lifted. She touched his cheek with fingers smeared in blood. Her eyes fluttered. She tried to speak, but only a whimper escaped, thin as smoke. "I'm here," he sobbed, holding her tighter. Forgive me. I should have." But she wasn't listening anymore. Her gaze was far away, staring past him, beyond the wooden ceiling, into nothingness. One last breath shuddered out of her chest. Her lips formed his name again, soundless this time. Then she stilled. Alveric froze. His arms tightened, as if he could hold her soul inside her body by sheer force. His chest heaved. His mind screamed, but no sound left his mouth. The room blurred. He rocked back and forth, clutching her like a child clutching a doll broken beyond repair. Outside comma laughter, continued. He staggered to his feet, carrying her limp body into the courtyard. The music faltered as people turned. The crowd gasped, but too few stepped forward. Women cried out in shock. Men looked away, muttering excuses, retreating into the smoke of their cigarettes. "Help me!" Alveric roared. "She's bleeding, she's—" No one moved, no one wanted to see. It was easier to believe she had fainted, that she had been weak, that nothing shameful had happened. To speak it aloud would ruin the family, the ritual, the night. Better silence than truth. Isabella's blood dripped onto the earth, dotting, the ground between Alveric's feet. The sound was unbearable to him, each drop like a hammer in his skull. "Which of you did this?" He shouted, wild-eyed, searching the faces. But every face turned away. Only Christian stood near, his glass still in hand, his expression carved in stone. He did not step forward. He did not meet Alvaric's eyes. He stared at the ground as though it might open and swallow him. You knew. Alvaric's voice broke into a whisper. You knew, and you did nothing. Christian's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Silence was safer. Silence was cowardice. The music ceased entirely. Screams began, women covering their mouths, children dragged away from the sight. The courtyard, once lit with joy, became chaos. Some men shouted to fetch a healer, others to cover the body, still others to keep quiet, to preserve honor. Alvaric sank to his knees, holding Isabella against his chest. Rocking her as the world around him collapsed, he pressed his face to her hair, sobbing into it, smelling the iron tang of blood that would never wash out. Come back, he begged. Please, come back. But her body was already stiffening. Her eyes stared lifeless at the Janur arch. Above, the leaves rattled violently in the night breeze, louder than before, their yellow tips flickering in the torchlight like tongues of fire. Guests whispered in terror. No longer did the Janur Kuning look like a blessing. In that moment, everyone saw it for what it had become, not the gate of union, but a banner of death. The laughter had died. The music was gone. Only the whisper of leaves remained, hissing in the wind, mocking the living. Alvaric held his bride's corpse, paralyzed in grief. His face was wet with tears and blood, and his scream split the night, echoing into the hills. A sound no one would ever forget. The Janur swayed above, a flag of mourning, as if announcing to the gods themselves, the bride is dead. The wedding is over. The curse has begun. The morning after should have been filled with songs of blessing, laughter, and the chatter of neighbors recalling the beauty of the bride. Instead, the air was heavy with smoke and whispers. The Janur Kuning arch still stood at the gate, but its brightness was gone. Its tips had browned overnight, curling like dead fingers. Isabella's body was shrouded hastily in white cloth, carried out before the sun had risen high. The women wailed as they wrapped her, but their voices carried a tremor of fear, not only grief. It was easier to murmur that the bride was weak, that her body had betrayed her, than to speak of the truth that rotted beneath their tongues. She fainted, one whispered. Too fragile for marriage, another added. Her womb wasn't strong, a third concluded, shaking her head. The lies spread quickly, fluttering like moths desperate to smother the flame of reality. The men said little, avoiding each other's eyes, puffing their kredex until smoke shielded their guilt. No one wanted to say the word. Rape, violation, murder. To speak it would mean to admit their silence, their complicity. Alvaric followed, the beer with a hollow gaze. His face was gaunt, his hair unkempt, his wedding suit now wrinkled and stained. He held no umbrella to shield him from the sun, no kerchief to wipe his sweat. His arms hung limp, but his jaw was tight, locked with rage. When they lowered Isabella into the grave, he fell to his knees, clawing at the soil as though he might hold her back from the earth. I swear, he whispered, his voice raw. I will find the ones who did this. I will tear their faces from their skulls. I will. But the soil covered her anyway, shovel by shovel. Each clump fell like the sound of a closing door. Christian stood near, his expression a mask of sorrow. He placed a hand on Alvaric's shoulder, murmuring, "We must accept God's will." She was too delicate. Perhaps her blood was never strong. Alvaric shrugged his hand off violently. Don't you dare speak of her like that. His eyes burned. You were there. You saw them. Why didn't you stop it? Christian flinched but said nothing. His gaze darted away, back to the grave. I saw nothing, he lied. You're grief-stricken, brother. Be careful with your words. Alvaric's breath shook. He wanted to strike him, to tear the truth out with his fists, but his body was too weak. The rage collapsed into despair, and he buried his face in his palms. The villagers watched from a distance, whispering. She was beautiful, but frail. A pity the marriage was so short. Perhaps cursed. No one spoke of the wine, the laughter, the dragging hands. No one dared that night. Alvaric sat alone in their bridal chamber, staring at the empty bed. The sheets were gone, burned by his family to erase the stain of blood. Only the faint smell of smoke lingered, clinging to the carved teak walls. He pressed his face into his palms, shaking. What kind of man am I, he muttered, that I could not protect her? What kind of husband lets his bride be taken, killed, while he drinks and talks of business? His voice cracked. I am no man. I am nothing. He slammed his fist into the wall until his knuckles bled. The wound throbbed, but the pain was a mercy. It distracted him from the greater wound inside. Outside, the village grew quiet. The laughter of the night before was gone. Only the rustle of palm leaves, only the distant bark of a dog. Christian returned once more, carrying rice and broth, pretending concern. He placed them before Alvaric, murmuring platitudes about grief, about moving on, about patience. But Alvaric saw the tremor in his hands, the way his eyes never met his. You know, Alvaric whispered, voice low, and it will eat you alive. Christian froze, then forced a smile. Rest. Tomorrow is another day. He left quickly, leaving the food untouched. Alvaric lay awake, staring at the ceiling, consumed by questions. Where had God been when she prayed? Where had he been when she cried? What kind of love was his if it could not save her? His chest ached with shame. He remembered the way she had whispered his name in her last breath, and it felt like a knife lodged permanently in his heart. He had failed her. He would always fail her. Midnight came. The air thickened, heavy with the smell of damp soil. The wind hissed through the Janur arch still standing at the gate, rattling like bones in the dark. In the graveyard, the soil above Isabella's body shifted faintly, as if something beneath stirred. The moonlight cast pale shadows across the mounds of earth, turning each grave into a restless beast. Inside her shroud, Isabella's eyes snapped open. The whites were clouded, her irises glazed, but they burned with something beyond death. Her lips, sewn shut by ritual, strained as if to scream. Her fingers twitched, nails clawing against the cloth. The earth above her chest heaved once, then fell still. The village slept, unaware. But the dead bride no longer slept at all. The village thought burying her in silence would close the wound. They thought lies could cover blood, that gossip could hide sin. But some wounds rot. Some wounds rise. On the third night after her burial, the air thickened. The yellow Janur arch rattled without wind, its leaves curling inward as though strangled by unseen hands. The courtyard where the wedding feast had once throbbed with gamelan now lay empty, shadows gathering like mourners who had never left. From the soil of her grave, she rose. Her shroud was torn from within, white cloth smeared brown with damp earth, and streaked with crimson that never dried. Blood dripped endlessly from between her thighs, soaking the ground as she staggered to her feet. Her face was pale, lips purple, eyes wide open but glazed with fury. Her hair hung matted, clotted with soil, framing her like a dark crown. Each step she took left a wet trail on the ground. She returned to the wedding hall. The lanterns flickered wildly, then one by one extinguished as shadows crawled across the walls like serpents. The wooden beams creaked as though bowing to her presence. The smell of iron, sweat, and rotting flowers filled the air. Dot, the first man. To see her was one of the drunkards who had laughed the loudest that night. He had avoided her funeral, claiming illness. Tonight, he sat alone in the courtyard, still drunk, muttering to himself. His eyes lifted and froze Dot. She stood before him, veil hanging in tatters, blood dripping down her legs. "Isabella," he whispered, voice strangled with disbelief. Dot. She tilted her head. Her lips pulled back into a smile too wide, showing broken teeth. From her womb spilled a thick stream of blood that coiled like a living snake on the ground. The man screamed, stumbling backward, but shadows pinned him where he stood. Dot, his scream was muffled by the night as unseen hands seized his groin. His body convulsed. A ripping sound split the silence, wet and obscene. His shriek died into a gurgle. When his body collapsed, blood spread beneath him, his genitals torn away, his face frozen in a scream of horror. Dot. The shadows receded. She was gone. Dot. The villagers found his corpse at dawn. They whispered of sickness, of punishment for drinking too much. None dared speak of the blood pooled between his legs, nor of the horror carved into his face. Dot. But Christian knew. Dot. That night, he sat in his house, staring at the mirror above his dresser. His hands trembled as he poured Arak into a cup, trying to steady himself. His wife had left days ago, unsettled by his sleepless nights, by the way he muttered to shadows. He was alone now. Dot. He raised the cup to his lips and froze. Dot in the mirror. She stood behind him. Isabella, her head tilted, her hair dripping earth and blood, her eyes locked on his. Dot. He spun around. The room was empty. The lamp flickered. Dot. He turned back to the mirror. She was closer now, her lips parted, and blood spilled over her chin, staining her shroud. Dot. Christian dropped the cup. Glass shattered across the floor. He backed away, heart hammering. No. I said nothing. I told no one. But the mirror gave no mercy. Her hand lifted, pressing against the glass from the other side. Blood smeared across the surface, trickling downward in thick rivulets. Dot. Christian screamed, and threw a cloth over the mirror. His hands shook violently. Yet even with the glass covered, he heard her voice whispering in his ear. You watched. You did nothing. He clutched his head, sobbing. Forgive me. But silence was her only answer. Dot. Elsewhere in the village, Alvaric dreamed. Dot. He dreamed of their bridal chamber, of the bed stripped bare, of the sheets burned. He lay alone in the room, the smell of smoke still clinging to the walls. Then he felt it, cold hands sliding over his chest, tender but icy, wet with something slick. Dot. He opened his eyes in the dream. Isabella was there, lying beside him, her face pale but radiant in its sorrow. She touched his face, caressed his jaw, her lips trembling as if she wished to kiss him. Dot. He reached for her, tears streaming. You came back. Her fingers pressed to his lips, silencing him. Cold. Too cold. When he looked down, he saw blood dripping from her hands, staining his chest. The sheets beneath them bloomed red. Dot. Her eyes filled his vision, dark and endless. She leaned close, her voice a whisper crawling into his ear. Not yet, my love. Not yet. He woke with a gasp, chest slick with sweat, sheets twisted around him. For a heartbeat, he thought he still felt her touch, her cold weight beside him. But the bed was empty. The night was silent. Only the Janur outside rattled, whispering, like a death banner in the wind. The nights in Christian's house grew longer than the days. Each time the sun dipped, he felt it. The weight of her eyes pressing against the back of his neck. The lamps seemed to dim before their oil burned out, shadows sliding along the walls, like fingers reaching for him. At first it was only whispers, moans that rose from the corners of his room, soft and ragged, the kind of sound a bride might make on her wedding bed. But there was nothing tender in them. They were broken, guttural, soaked in pain. They came closer each night, until they echoed right beside his ear when he tried to sleep. His wife, Listari, endured as long as she could. She begged him to see a healer, to pray at the mosque, to cleanse himself. But when she woke one night, to find him screaming at the mirror, clawing at his own skin, she could no longer stay. "I cannot live in this house," she sobbed, clutching their child. "You are cursed! You bring death into our bed!" "Don't leave me!" Christian pleaded, his voice raw. He reached for her, but she pulled away. Eyes full of terror. She left that morning, slamming the door so hard the frame cracked. The house felt colder instantly, hollow. Her absence did not silence the whispers. It made them louder. That night, Christian dreamt he was lying in the bridal chamber. He smelled incense and clove, heard gamelan faintly, as if from a far distance. His body was heavy, pinned by invisible weight. He opened his eyes and saw blood spreading across the sheets. It seeped from beneath him, warm and thick, soaking his clothes. He screamed, clutching his stomach, expecting to find a wound. But his flesh was uncut, no blade, no tear. The blood poured anyway, filling the bed, dripping onto the floor until it lapped against his ankles. He jolted awake, gasping, soaked in sweat. His hands went to his body, still whole, still unmarked. Yet the sheets beneath him were wet, dark, stinking of iron. He pulled the blanket back and saw it. Blood pooled across the mattress, soaking deep into the straw. "No." His voice cracked. "No, no, no." He staggered to his feet, slipping in the mess, nearly falling. He grabbed the lamp and held it high. The walls were splattered crimson, streaks dripping like paint. The smell was suffocating. But when he blinked, gone. The bed was dry, the walls clean. Only the stink of blood lingered in his nose, refusing to leave. He sank to the floor, trembling, clutching his head. His chest heaved. His voice broke in confession. "I knew," he whispered. "I knew they dragged her. I saw it. And I turned away. I told myself it wasn't my place, that it wasn't my sin. But it was. It was. I let them tear her apart, and I did nothing." His tears fell onto the floorboards. His hands shook. He slammed his fists against the wood until his knuckles split, blood smearing across the grain. The lamp flickered. He looked up. In the mirror across the room, she was waiting. Isabella. Her veil was gone, hair hanging in filthy ropes across her shoulders. Blood dripped steadily from between her thighs, pattering onto the floor that existed only in the reflection. Her lips curled into a smile too wide, torn at the corners as if ripped by unseen hands. "Forgive me," Christian begged, crawling toward the glass. His voice was hoarse, broken. "I should have stopped them. I should have." Her head tilted. Her smile deepened. Her teeth were stained red. Then she moved closer, not in the room, but in the reflection. Her face pressed against the inside of the glass, her torn lips splitting wider, flesh cracking. Blood smeared across the mirror's surface from the inside, streaking down as though she were clawing her way out. Christian staggered back, shaking his head violently. "No, please, not me." But the mirror showed no mercy. Her eyes locked on his, cold and endless. Her smile widened until it split her cheeks. The lamp blew out. The room sank into darkness. Christian screamed. The seventh night fell heavy over the village. The air was dense, suffocating, as though the earth itself refused to breathe. The Janur cooning arch, once a symbol of blessing, loomed black against the sky. Its pale leaves had withered, their tips curled and brittle. They whispered when the wind passed, not like joy, but like teeth grinding together. The rapists gathered in different places, thinking themselves safe in drink, in smoke, in silence. But their hearts were restless. Their dreams were not their own. Each night they woke with sweat-soaked sheets, with the faint taste of iron in their mouths. Tonight, the nightmares walked while they were awake. One by one, they found themselves drawn, not by choice, but by a force deeper than hunger or fear, back to the wedding hall. The gamelan no longer played, yet they heard it. Broken notes, twisted rhythms, drums that echoed like heartbeats from the grave. The hall stood as it had on the night of joy, lanterns swaying, tables laden with food. But the meat was rotting, crawling with maggots. The flowers had blackened, petals falling like ash. The air stank of incense mixed with decay. And she was there. Isabella. Her shroud trailed behind her, soaked in soil and blood. Her face was pale as bone, lips torn into a grotesque smile. Blood still dripped steadily from between her legs, pattering on the wooden floor like the rhythm of a ritual drum. Her eyes swept over them, cold, endless, accusing. "Sit," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but it thundered in their skulls. They sat, trembling, on chairs that had not been there a moment before. Their bodies obeyed, though their souls screamed to flee. The feast stretched before them, but none could lift a hand to eat. One man, Artie, who had torn her veil that night, began to choke. The chair bound him in place as Isabella drifted closer. She lifted the ruined veil from her neck, wrapping it slowly around his face. He screamed, but the cloth tightened, sinking into his skin. His eyes bulged, his lips turned blue. He clawed at the fabric, but it fused with his flesh, smothering him. His body convulsed. With a final twitch, he went still, the veil sinking into his skin until his face was nothing but a smooth white shroud. The others shrieked, but their voices made no sound. Another, Bhima, who had laughed the loudest, suddenly clutched his groin. His legs kicked wildly, his eyes rolled back. Invisible hands pinned him to the chair. He screamed until his throat tore. Then came the ripping, wet, obscene. Blood sprayed across the table, staining the rotting flowers. His body slumped forward, a gurgling moan the only sound he made as his life drained onto the feast. The hall stank of blood now, thick and coppery. Isabella's laughter filled the room. Soft, broken, a bride's laugh twisted into madness. One by one she turned her gaze on them, each punished in the way they had defiled her. A hand crushed beneath invisible stones for the man who had pinned her wrists. A tongue torn out for the one who mocked her cries. The sound of bones breaking echoed against the wooden beams as shadows bent their bodies until ribs snapped through. Flesh. Their screams filled the hall, but no one outside heard. By the time Alvaric arrived, the sky was pale with dawn. He had been drawn by instinct, by a cold dread that refused to let him sleep. The courtyard was silent, the air heavy. The Janur arch swayed violently, though no wind blew. He stepped inside. The sight froze him. Corpses sprawled across the hall, mutilated beyond recognition. Blood pooled on the wooden floor, soaking into the boards, dripping between the cracks. Some bodies were missing faces, others torn limb from limb. The stench of iron and rot was suffocating. Alvaric staggered forward, covering his mouth, eyes wide with horror. He recognized pieces of them, rings on fingers, scraps of cloth, but not one face remained whole. He sank to his knees, clutching his head. "God help us," he whispered. "What curse is this?" The silence was broken by a hiss. He looked up. The Janur cooning arch outside the hall shivered violently. Then, without touch, it burst into flames. The leaves curled and blackened. Fire. Racing up their spines, sparks leaping into the air. The flames roared, bright against the morning sky, devouring the last symbol of blessing. Guests from nearby houses rushed out, gasping, crossing themselves, some falling to their knees. The arch crackled, collapsing in a heap of ash and smoke. Alveric stared, tears streaming down his face, his voice raw with despair. The yellow Janur was gone. What remained was no longer a banner of joy, but the first signal of a war between the living and the Da. The village no longer spoke of Isabella aloud. Her name had become a curse on the tongue, yet the silence could not erase her presence. The night carried her footsteps. The wind carried her sighs. The earth itself seemed to tremble beneath the weight of her unrest. Alveric lived in fragments. By day he walked like a hollow man, face gaunt, eyes shadowed, lips cracked from sleepless nights. By night he drowned in dreams so vivid they felt more real than waking. Always she came, his bride, his love, his shame. On the 9th night, he woke to cold breath brushing across his cheek. His eyes fluttered open. She was there. Isabella. Her form wavered, half shroud, half flesh, her beauty twisted by the grave. Her hair hung heavy with soil, her lips torn at the corners but glistening as though newly painted. Blood still dripped between her thighs, trailing down her legs, staining the floor. Yet her eyes, those eyes, were the same. Dark pools where sorrow and fury battled. "Beloved," she whispered. Her voice was soft, trembling, soaked with longing and rage. Alveric's breath caught. "Isabella, forgive me." She straddled him where he lay on the bed, her body cold as riverstone. Her hands slid across his chest, tender yet leaving streaks of blood. He shuddered, torn between desire and horror. Her touch burned into his skin, bruises blooming where her fingers pressed. "You swore to protect me," she hissed. Her nails dug into his shoulders, drawing blood. "And yet you let them?" Her voice cracked, breaking into a sob. "You let them tear me apart." Tears filled his eyes. "I didn't know. Her lips pressed to his throat, cold and wet. She kissed him with desperation, then bit down. Pain flared, sharp as a blade. He gasped, clutching her, but she only clung tighter, drinking his suffering. When she lifted her face, his blood stained her mouth. She licked it slowly, eyes burning. "I love you. I hate you. You are my husband. You are my failure." He wept, trembling beneath her. His body ached with guilt, with love twisted into punishment. "Then take me," he begged. "End me as you ended them." But she only laughed, a broken sound, halfway between a sob and a shriek. She vanished in a rush of wind, leaving him, bruised and bleeding, clutching at empty air. Elsewhere, Christian knelt in his house, praying until his lips bled. He whispered confessions, begged for mercy. The room grew cold. A shadow stretched across the wall. Then she was there, Isabella, standing in the corner, her veil dragging across the floor. "Please," Christian sobbed. "Please forgive me. I was weak. I was a coward. I should have stopped them. I should have saved you." Her head tilted. Her lips split into that grotesque smile. She stepped closer, each footfall leaving a smear of blood. "Forgive me!" he screamed. She leaned close, her breath freezing his skin. Then she laughed, low, cruel, a bride's giggle warped into something inhuman. Christian collapsed, shaking, clutching his ears. Her laughter filled the room, echoing inside his skull. Alvaric, miles away, dreamed again. He found himself in their bridal chamber, the sheets red, the lamp flickering. She lay beside him, pale and broken, yet beautiful in her ruin. He turned to her, cupping her face. I failed you, but I still love you. Her eyes softened for a moment, sorrow breaking through rage. She leaned in. Their lips met. The kiss was cold, wet with blood. He pulled back, gasping, his mouth smeared red. Her whisper slithered into his ear, soft as silk, sharp as glass. You will never taste me without tasting death. The cursed hall waited, silent, its beams blackened by smoke, its floor still stained with blood that no one dared to clean. The villagers avoided it, circling wide whenever they passed. But on the 13th night, Christian found himself drawn, there against his will. It began with footsteps in the dark, his own, though he had no memory of rising from bed. The night air was heavy, damp, carrying the smell of iron and incense. He stumbled forward as if dragged by unseen hands, his legs, not his own. Each step carried him closer to the gate where the Janur Kuning still hung in tatters, half burned but refusing to fall. The pale leaves rattled though the air was still. The door of the hall creaked open before him. He tried to turn away, but shadows wrapped around his arms, pulling him inside. The gamelan began to play. But the sound was twisted, each note broken, each gong warped, as though the instruments had been drowned. The air thickened with smoke. The feast appeared again, tables sagging under rotten food, lanterns flickering weakly, flowers shriveled into ash. And at the center, Isabella. She stood barefoot on the blood-stained boards, her veil shredded, her body dripping earth and blood. Her eyes glowed with cold fury. Sit, she commanded. Christian collapsed into a chair that appeared behind him, his body rigid, frozen. His throat worked, but no words came. She raised her hand. Shadows gathered, weaving like needles. They pierced his eyelids, sewing them open with invisible thread. He screamed, but the sound was thin, strangled, swallowed by the hall. His eyes burned, forced wide, unable to blink. Watch, she whispered. And then the hall changed. Before him, the scene replayed, the night of the wedding. He saw himself standing by the dais, glass in hand, while Isabella was dragged away by laughing men. He saw her eyes wide with terror, her lips forming silent pleas. He remembered how he looked away, pretending not to see. No, he sobbed, struggling against the threads cutting into his flesh. Please, not again. But she forced him. The laughter filled the air, coarse, mocking. He watched as they pinned her down, as her veil was torn, as her cries were drowned beneath the music. He saw every second he had chosen to ignore. You could have saved me, Isabella screamed, her voice splitting the air. It was her voice then, and her voice now, echoing together, piercing his soul. He shook his head violently, blood dripping from the corners of his eyes where the threads dug deeper. I was afraid. You were a coward, she shrieked, her figure towering over him, her torn lips trembling with rage. You drank while I bled. You looked away while they broke me. He sobbed, jerking against the invisible bonds, his throat raw. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. But her eyes burned brighter, her body shaking with fury. You will never be forgiven. The shadows surged. They wrapped around his throat, lifting him from the chair. His legs kicked helplessly. His sewn eyes still stared, unblinking, forced, to watch the final moments of her agony replay again and again. The hall filled with the sound of ripping cloth, of her broken sobs, of mocking laughter. He screamed until his voice tore, until only a rasp remained. His body convulsed, then fell limp, still suspended by the threads. At dawn, the villagers found him. Christian's body hung from the Janur gate, his eyes wide open, lips frozen in a silent scream. The leaves above him rattled violently, though no wind stirred. Blood dripped onto the earth below, forming a dark stain at the threshold. The people crossed themselves, whispering prayers. Some said he had hanged himself in madness. Others knew better. The Janur cooning swayed in the still air, no longer pale, but blackened by ash. The banner of death had claimed another soul. The village never healed. What was once the pride of the people, a wedding hall alive with music, smoke, and laughter, stood rotting, its doors locked, its beams black with soot. The Janur cooning arch, once a crown of joy, was left in place, but no one dared touch it. Its leaves had darkened, brittle, rattling whenever the wind stirred. To the villagers, it was no longer a gate of blessing. It was the banner of death. Children were forbidden to play near the hall. Mothers clutched, their little ones tighter whenever they passed. The men avoided looking at it altogether. When its shadow fell across the path at dusk, they crossed to the other side of the street. One by one, families began to leave. They packed their belongings silently at night, unwilling to admit fear, but unable to stay. They whispered prayers as they fled, leaving homes behind, as though distance might save them from the curse. The village thinned. Doors were boarded shut. Chickens wandered untended. The once lively courtyard where Gamelin had sung was swallowed by weeds. And still, the hall remained, watching, waiting. Inside his house, Alvaric lingered like a ghost of his own. His skin was pale, his hair wild, his eyes hollow. He spoke little, ate less, living in the limbo between sleep and nightmare. At night, he lay in the empty bridal bed. His fingers traced the mattress where her body should have been. His lips whispered her name into the dark. Isabella. Forgive me. Isabella. Sometimes the air shifted, and he felt her there. A weight pressing down beside him. Cold hands, brushing his chest. The smell of soil and blood filling the room. He turned, and in the flicker of lamplight, he saw her. Her shroud trailing across the floor. Her hair dripping earth. Her eyes wide, filled with sorrow and fury. Blood dripped endlessly from between her legs, soaking the sheets. She never spoke, but her presence spoke louder than words. Alvaric wept, reaching for her. Take me. I have nothing left. I am your husband. If you hate me, kill me. If you love me, let me hold you, but don't leave me in this silence. Her cold fingers brushed his lips, silencing him. Then she vanished, leaving him clutching air, the sheets stained only with his tears. Each night was the same. Each night he broke a little more. He was her husband, her lover, her betrayer, her survivor. He was everything and nothing. The villagers called him mad. They said he spoke to shadows. They said he sat for hours at the graveyard, whispering to the earth as though it might answer back. No one dared follow him there. No one dared ask. They feared what his eyes had seen. They feared what still lingered in the cursed soil. For Isabella had not left. Her spirit roamed still, drifting through the village on silent feet. Some nights women swore they heard her sobbing near the well. Men confessed they heard her moans at their windows, wet and broken, sending them into trembling fits. Children cried of a pale bride watching them from the shadows, her hands stained, With blood. Always, her womb dripped. Always, her vengeance followed. The hall remained her throne. The Janur, her banner. No one dared hold a wedding beneath its arch again. No one wove Janur Kuning for celebration. To raise the pale leaves now was to summon her, to invite her blood into the bed. So the tradition died. And in its place grew legend, the bride whose body was defiled, whose soul rose in rage, whose vengeance burned brighter than any blessing. Alvaric aged quickly, hunched and gray before his years. He still whispered to the bed at night, still begged for her touch, still dreamt of her lips. And when he closed his eyes, she always came. Sometimes tender, sometimes cruel, sometimes a lover, sometimes a specter. Always dripping blood, always reminding him that guilt is a shackle heavier than death. The village was no more. Houses crumbled, fields grew wild, but her presence endured, her shadow swaying with the burnt Janur, her rage carried in the wind. And in the silence, her whisper lingered. Blood dries, bodies rot, but the vengeance of a bride never dies.